So this is our 1979 Mercedes-Benz 300 TD. This is the diesel wagon. This built in 1979 for the US market, was only available with the OM617 naturally aspirated diesel. As we're rebuilding this car, and we've already finished rebuilding the suspension and the brakes on the car, we are swapping in the turbodiesel engine. So this would be an OM617 NA. This engine came out of a 1983 300 TD. So the power increase on that is pretty significant. We're going from about 77 horsepower to 125 horsepower and about 100 and I believe it's about 130 foot-pounds of torque to about 160, I think. So it's a pretty good power jump. But in the years for this is the W123 chassis, and in the years between 79 and 83, quite a few things changed on the chassis. So while this engine literally bolts right in, and we've already done that, it's in place and bolted to the existing transmission and engine mounts. There's a lot of red duct tape on here, and that's marking all of the connection points, many of which no longer match up. So we're going to be spending a fair amount of time here over the next couple of weeks working to try to hook up all the systems so that this is functional. The engine itself is completely mechanical, relatively straightforward. Getting it running shouldn't be too hard, but to get all the sensors, the dash, all of the vacuum powered equipment to function, air conditioning, the hydraulic self-leveling rear suspension, cruise control. There's quite a few things in here that we're going to have to swap around. So just a few things to note on here that are different. On the 1979 chassis, right over here, we used to have the cruise control module, and we've just removed that. And you can see here on the 1983 engine that this is actually the cruise control module, and you can see the linkage here that runs over to control that throttle. The engine has a few other obvious differences as well. You can't see it here, but the radiator in the 1979 had a filler cap basically right on the radiator and just had an overflow tank. On the 1983, the radiator, which looks very similar, actually has a pressure tank that sits on top of the fender over here, and that pressure tank has the radiator cap, and there's no cap on the actual radiator. A lot of the other systems the big systems are relatively similar, but a couple of the other things that we found, the 1983 has a relay controller here for the glow plugs. That does not exist on the 1979 chassis. One of the really interesting things we found was that there's a difference in the transmission plugs. So we've swapped in the transmission from the 1983. It's a 722.3, where this would have had a 722.1 in it from a 79. The plug is different, but even though the wires are essentially the same for the lockout. On the 1979, there's a starter relay circuit inside the car. In 1983, there was no actual relay. They ran the full power through the transmission, so it's a much thicker wire. We'll be hooking up the system as though it's a 1979. The switch in the transmission now will simply go back to the relay, which still exists in the chassis. But there's obviously a difference there, and the plug itself is vastly different, as the transmission's quite a bit bigger for the 1983, the 722.3 transmission. So we'll have some more information as we kind of continue to put this build back together, and trying to detail a few of the other things that we find that are different between them and how we've put this all together. We'll probably spend a little bit of time talking about the self-leveling suspension. We're piecing this back together from two different systems, and hopefully we'll be able to get that functional. And we'll show you how we kind of what that entailed. But hopefully we'll be able to get that system up and running as well. So we're pretty excited to be getting this car closer to ready to go again, and hopefully it will be back on the road in just a few short months, and somebody will be able to enjoy this classic Mercedes.